What celebrity did bad things but everyone forgot what they did because they're famous? Vince Neil of Motley Crue drove drunk and killed one of his very good friends and gave the two people in the other car very bad injuries and brain damage. He also had other DUIs after this. But hey, everybody loves a good party song, and now he has a famous liquor brand. Floyd Mayweather beats his wife with hands that are registered as lethal weapons in front of his children. But because he wins, nobody cares. Jimmy Superfly Snuka killed his girlfriend and got inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. Kurt Cobain's mother regularly goes on talk shows and interviews where she talks about how supportive she was of Kurt and how she knew how famous he would become from the moment she heard his music. Yup, it's the same mom that abused Kurt and kicked him out multiple times, making him live at his grandparents' friends and sometimes not confirmed sleep under a bridge. Kelly married Aaliyah when she was 15 years old in the mid-90s, and yet it took like 2 decades for people to start boycotting him as a sexual predator. He was still making songs with Beyonce and Lady Gaga etc. for a long time. Rick James kidnapped 2 women with his wife while on separate crack binges. Ted Nugent shit his pants to dodge the draft and has a song called Jailbait which ends with him pleading with an officer not to arrest him and instead share a 13-year-old. Johnny Cash walked out on his wife and kids saying that his career was more important to him than they were, then went on to eventually settle down with June Carter and start a whole new family while still ignoring the kids he already had. Boy George. He beat a guy with a metal chain after cuffing him to a radiator. Should make for an interesting sequence in his forthcoming biopic. Steven Tyler became the guardian for a 16-year-old he was dating when he was 25 so he could bring her on tour. Knocked her up too. Piers Morgan was the editor of the Daily Mirror during the Iraq War. Published photos that he knew were fake of American and British troops abusing Iraqi prisoners. He was fired, but somehow managed to make a successful media career out of it. Here's a list I compiled earlier this year. Jimmy Page was 26 when he started calling 14-year-old Laurie Maddox his girlfriend. Mick Jagger had a few rounds with Maddox around the same time. Also of the Rolling Stones. Bill Wyman started dating 13-year-old Mandy Smith when he was 47. He got her mother's permission. Steven Tyler convinced the mother of 16-year-old Julia Holcomb to make him her legal guardian, then snorted blow from next to her hospital bed while she was having an abortion. David Bowie, the beloved, managed to get Laurie Maddox's virginity and got her to bring her 15-year-old friend along, in addition to many other underage girls. Jerry Lee Lewis of course married his 13-year-old cousin. She still believed in Santa on their honeymoon. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll himself, was routinely in trouble with underage girls, and even the fabled romance with Priscilla is a tale of sexual interference. She was 14 when they met. Chuck Berry was arrested for crossing state lines with a 14-year-old prostitute. He was also recording women in the washroom of the restaurant he owned. Courtney Love says she gave Ted Nugent a blowjob when she was 12. He also adopted a 17-year-old so he could bang her without getting charged with kidnapping. He even wrote a song about avoiding pedophilia charges. Anthony Kiedis Red Hot Chili Peppers wrote songs about it too. Catholic School Girls Rule is about his hooking up with a 14-year-old at 23. Iggy Pop also wrote songs about sleeping with 13-year-olds too. Check out the lyrics to Look Away. Marvin Gaye knocked up his wife's 15-year-old niece. Don Henley the Eagles was charged after paramedics found him with 2 naked girls, aged 15 and 16. George Wallace, the infamous pro-segregation governor of Alabama in the 60s, did not inform his wife that her doctor diagnosed her with cancer. Doctors during this time often told patients' relatives of their cancer diagnosis instead of the patient, especially if the patient was female. The reason was that she was running for governor as a surrogate for him, since he had reached his term limits, and he thought that the diagnosis would negatively affect her chances of winning. She ended up finding out about it 4 years later during a visit to a gynecologist. But unfortunately the cancer had progressed to the point that she died from it 3 years after learning that she had cancer and that her husband had known about it. He ended up successfully getting the term limits repealed and went on to serve a few more terms as governor. People forget about this, I'm assuming, because of all of the other shitty things he did. Carol Malone got a 13-year-old pregnant and refused to take care of that child. Drake seems to be ignored for grooming a young underage fan at age 14 into being his girlfriend until she recently turned 18 this year. And now he's even supposedly doing it to a young actress. Every time something like this is posted, no one cares about my comment on how Sean Kingston, the American Jamaican rapper, has assaulted multiple women near where I live and has gotten away with it every time by threatening legal action. If anyone actually gives a shit, I can link proof from a girl explaining what happened to her, but I will censor some things for her sake. Basically has doing rap shows and then Bill Cosbying girls in the area, or you can just look up on Google Sean Kingston assault and many hits will come up. Duck you Sean Kingston, your music's dog shit. In my country there is a TV host that killed several people in a car accident. Twice. It was his fault both times. You can still see him on TV. Emma Roberts beat the shit out of her then boyfriend Evan Peters, then continued to co-star in the same show as him. Dr. Dre beat a reporter, D. Barnes, savagely for writing a negative story on him, or one he perceived as negative. I don't know. He picked her up by her hair and began slamming her head and the right side of her body repeatedly against a brick wall near the stairway as his bodyguard held off the crowd with a gun. After Dr. Dre tried to throw her down the stairs and failed, he began kicking her in the ribs and hands. She escaped and ran into the women's restroom. Dr. Dre followed her and grabbed her from behind by the hair again and proceeded to punch her in the back of the head. He and Eminem would go on to joke about it as the man who slapped D. Barnes. Dr. Dre produced and is featured in rapper Eminem's song Guilty Conscience, in which Eminem references the incident as a humorous put-down. Dre reportedly fell out of his chair laughing at it. There was that time James Franco tried to duck a teenager after she posted the exchange on social media of her telling him how old she was and him not caring and still wanting to see her. All he had to do was go on a few morning talk shows a couple days later and say, "You don't always know who you're talking to online," and everyone instantly forgot about it. He framed it like he was the one who was deceived, and people just let it slide, even though that clearly wasn't the case. Jerry Seinfeld dated a 17-year-old girl in high school when he was 39 years old. Will Smith was in YouTube Rewind 2018. Marcus Brownlee. Fortnite. I see people still saying great things about Tom Cruise all the time, especially on our movies. It's like they forgot he's huge into Scientology, you know. That ducked up group that locks people up in compounds until they conform. That group that has gotten away with murder. That group that skirts taxes with their BS church status. The group that intimidates and ruins lives that go against them. Mark Wahlberg beat and blinded a Vietnamese guy just because he was Vietnamese. John Lennon beat his wife. He yelled in his son's ear so loudly that he's now deaf in it, a child. I think you'll know the song Despacito, who is performed by Luis Fonsi. Well, this little piece of shit was married to a beautiful woman who had breast cancer. During her entire process of chemo he wasn't there, and he even told her, when she had a breast removed, that he didn't want her as a woman. This ended up in a divorce. James Franco tried to meet a 17-year-old girl in a hotel through Instagram. He was in his 30s when this happened. Marcus Alonso, football player for Chelsea FC, was driving drunk and killed a 22-year-old woman, driving 70 miles per hour in a 30 miles per hour zone with an alcohol level of 0.93 milligrams. His final punishment was a $67,000 fine and a driving ban of 40 months. He was driving drunk and crashed into a stone wall. The woman who was killed was his girlfriend, who was a passenger in his car. Cardi B bragged about drugging people. Drake. Nobody cares that he's a child fiddler and Rihanna basically ran for the hills because he makes good music. Steve Carell promised college tuitions to 3rd graders but didn't fall through to it. Consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more of Reddit Universe,